I let my wife's parents use our backyard for a garden, but a year later she told me it wasn't mine anymore. I walked outside and saw a sign saying private property. I pulled it from the ground, and what happened next changed everything. Hey, I'm Adam, I'm 43. I've spent most of my life in Loveland, Colorado. Even now, thinking back on what happened, it still makes me feel like I'm losing my grip on reality. I married Laura 10 years ago. She used to be warm, hilarious, incredibly patient. We had something really solid going, no huge fights, no messy drama. We bought this modest little house with a simple yard, nothing fancy, just enough space for a grill, a couple of chairs, and a patch of lawn where our dog Scout could run around. We chose not to have kids. We both worked full-time and enjoyed the quiet routine. I honestly thought our relationship was rock steady. Then her parents moved in. It all kicked off with one casual phone call. Laura said her folks, Frank and Judith, were thinking about selling their place in Pueblo and coming up here. Just temporarily, she told me. They'd crash in the guest room while they searched for a new home. I asked what temporarily meant. She guessed a few months, maybe even less. I agreed, because that's what you're supposed to do when family needs help, right? They arrived in early April. Frank's in his 70s and has one of those personalities where he acts like an expert on absolutely everything. Judith's quieter, but don't let that fool you. She notices everything, watches everything. I kept my thoughts to myself, even when Frank made passive-aggressive comments about how I mowed the lawn, or when Judith randomly reorganized our pantry like it was her own kitchen. I figured it'd be over soon. About a month and a half in, they asked if they could use a little corner of the backyard for gardening. That was Judith's idea. She said it would keep them active and help with food costs. I couldn't care less about cucumbers or cherry tomatoes, so I said sure, go for it. I even helped Frank build 2 raised beds out of leftover wood. We tore up part of the grass and got it all set up together. At that stage, it still felt like a fun little family bonding project. By midsummer though, the garden had nearly doubled. They added more beds, put up fencing, and installed a cheap plastic greenhouse from Home Depot. I thought, okay, they're getting into it, no harm done. If it makes them happy, fine. But something shifted. Judith began yelling at Scout if he even got near the garden beds. Frank started nitpicking how I watered the plants. One time I grabbed the hose and gave the tomatoes a good soak, and he scolded me. That's not how we do it. That's when it clicked that something weird was going on. And around then, Laura started siding with them in every single disagreement. I told her Scout should be able to roam freely. He lives here too. She just said, let them have their space. It's not that serious, she added. But it was, because that wasn't their space. That fall, Frank went and bought a prefab shed. He dropped it in the far corner of the yard and crammed it full of tools, seed packets, and who knows what else. When I brought up moving it before winter, he just said, we'll deal with it later. Then winter showed up. The garden bed sat quiet, untouched, but the shed stayed. So did the tacky little solar lights they'd hung on the fence. And yeah, so did those ridiculous gnome statues. Then one night in January, I came home to something that seriously ticked me off. A new sign had been posted at the edge of the patio near the garden. Please keep out. I asked Laura about it. She sighed like I was being dramatic and said, it's just a joke. Dad's just a little overprotective. I told her, you can't joke about claiming territory in someone else's yard. She just rolled her eyes. And by the time spring rolled around, they'd expanded even more. Frank built a bench under this homemade trellis and started calling it his meditation zone. I overheard Judith on the phone telling someone it was her sanctuary. At that point, I felt like I'd become invisible. I kept telling myself they'd be moving out soon. But they weren't. No one was touring homes. No one even mentioned looking anymore. They just settled in, like they owned the place. Then came the final straw. One morning in April, I let Scout out as usual and stood on the porch sipping coffee. The sun was just coming up. That's when I saw it. A fresh wooden post had been pounded deep into the ground just before the garden started. Hanging from it was a crisp wooden sign with black painted letters. Private property. Do not enter. I blinked, stunned, walked over, reached out to touch it, half expecting it to be a prank. But no, it was solid, screwed in tight. The paint was clean and deliberate, not a joke. I ripped it out, not gently. I yanked it out like I was pulling out a knife. My hands were literally shaking. I didn't wait long. When Laura got home later, I had the sign laid out right on the kitchen table, front and center. She walked in, saw it, and her eyes narrowed. You pulled it out, like I was the one crossing a line. What the hell is this? I snapped. Private property? In our own damn backyard. She rubbed at her temples like I was giving her a headache. Adam, seriously. It's just to help my dad feel like he has something of his own. You know how he gets. I said, that's not something, that's our backyard. I never gave up ownership. This isn't a community park. She crossed her arms. You've been so controlling about it. You never cared about that space until they started using it. Now all of a sudden it's an issue. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't about tomatoes, or raised beds, or a bench. This was about control. about lines being drawn. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, staring out the back window, just watching, and that's when I saw Frank, out there in the dark, walking through the garden like it was his. He stared at the patch of dirt where the sign used to be. After a moment, he gave a little shake of his head and quietly stepped into the shed. I didn't care. The next morning, I called an attorney. I needed clarity, legally, on where I stood in all this, because I wasn't about to let two people who didn't pay a cent for this house stake a claim on a piece of it and call it their own. Later that day, Laura asked me if something was wrong. I told her straight up, we need to have a serious conversation about who's actually in charge here. She rolled her eyes. It's not a dictatorship. No, I said, but it sure as hell isn't some family democracy where your parents get a vote either. She didn't say anything, just turned and walked away. That night, Frank knocked on our bedroom door. Can we talk tomorrow morning? I think we need to clear the air. I said sure, but I already knew there was no air to clear. I wasn't looking for resolution. I was ready to take everything back. The next morning I woke up early again, barely slept. I went downstairs, made a pot of coffee, and sat waiting. Laura had already left. No note, no goodbye, just a text that said we'll talk later. Right at 8 a.m., Frank strutted into the kitchen like he owned the damn place. Helped himself to coffee, my coffee, without even asking. He sat across from me like it was a scheduled meeting in some corporate boardroom. Folded his hands, gave me a smile. Adam, he began, I think we've had a breakdown in communication. I stared at him. No, Frank, what we've had is a breakdown in respect. He gave this little smug smile, like I was being unreasonable. You have to understand, he said. We've put a lot of time and energy into that garden. Money too. It's become important to us, part of our routine. It's even helped with our mental health. He paused for effect. I think it deserves some boundaries. It's not your land, I said flat out. You don't get to set boundaries on property that doesn't belong to you. He leaned in, voice calm but firm. That's exactly it. You keep saying it's your property, but you and Laura are married. She's the one who invited us, and she's made it clear she sees the yard as shared family space now. I froze for a second. What does that even mean? I asked. He looked me dead in the eye. It means we're not going anywhere, and we're not giving up the garden. If you want peace in this house, you'll have to accept that. I laughed. It came out sharp, colder than I meant. Let me get this straight. You move in for a few months, take over the backyard, put up a private property sign, and now you're telling me to accept it. He just smiled, like that was exactly the deal. I stood up, walked straight to the garage, popped open a storage bin, and pulled out the deed to the house. Clear as day. My name, no one else's. I walked back in and slapped it down on the kitchen table. This is who owns the house, I said. Not you. Not even your daughter, me. Frank didn't even glance at it. He just stood up and said, You've made your position clear. I hope you don't end up regretting it. That evening, when Laura got home, I didn't wait for her to get settled. We need to talk, I told her. For real this time. No walking away. She gave a slow nod. Dad said you threatened him. I blinked. Threatened. You pulled out the deed and waved it around like it was a weapon. I showed him the deed. I said, That's not a threat. It's reality. She folded her arms. You're acting like a tyrant. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A tyrant. Your parents have taken over my house. They don't pay a dime in rent. They're setting rules like it's some kind of private retreat, and you keep backing them every time. She sighed. You're twisting this. No, I said. I'm finally seeing it for what it is. Then she dropped something I never saw coming. They already gave me money, she said, sitting down. A lot of it. After they sold their house last fall, they gave me 60 grand. I used it toward the mortgage. I just stared at her. What are you talking about? She looked away. They paid down $70,000. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd flip. My whole body went cold. You used their money on my house without telling me. It's our house, she snapped. I did what was best for us. I shook my head slowly. No, you did what was best for them. She didn't argue. She didn't speak. The silence between us was suffocating. I stood up and walked outside, looked at the garden beds, the lights, the fencing, the shed, all of it. It didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like theirs. And in that moment, I realized I didn't even know who I was married to. That night, I called a different lawyer, not for the house, for a divorce consult. I hadn't made any final decisions yet, but something inside me had snapped, and there was no going back. The lawyer's name was Danny Marks, straightforward guy, professional, no nonsense, and he didn't talk down to me. I laid it all out for him. The garden, the sign, the backyard takeover, the hidden money, all of it. When I got to the part about the $70,000 her parents gave her, without telling me, he paused. Do you know if that money was intended as a gift or a loan? He asked. Anything in writing? Nope, I said. She just told me about it last night. Total surprise. He nodded slowly. That's actually good. If it was a gift, and there's no paperwork, it can help your case. But if they try to claim it was a loan, especially during a divorce, things can get messy. That word hit me hard again. Divorce. I hadn't told Laura I'd spoken to a lawyer. Not yet. But things were unraveling fast, and it got worse 2 days later. I got off work early, around 4, and pulled into the driveway. Out in the backyard, I spotted Frank and two men I'd never seen before. One had a tape measure, the other was holding rolled-up blueprints. I didn't even wait to park properly. I got out and stormed straight across the lawn. "What the hell is this?" I demanded. Frank turned to me, completely unfazed. "Landscape planning. For what?" He raised an eyebrow. "We're considering putting in a pergola, maybe a raised deck, water feature too. My buddy Greg here does this professionally," Frank said. I glanced at Greg and locked eyes. "You're not doing anything unless I approve it." Frank lifted a hand like he was diffusing tension. "Just tossing around ideas, Adam. No need to get all worked up." "Toss 'em around in your dreams," I snapped. "This isn't your land, this isn't your project, and I don't want strangers walking through my yard while I'm gone." Greg shifted uncomfortably. "Sorry, man. I was told everything was cleared." I turned to Frank. "Told by who?" That's when I heard Laura's voice behind me, coming from the patio. I did. I turned around. She stood there with her arms folded like she'd been waiting for me to blow up. "You went behind my back again?" I asked. "It's just the backyard, Adam," she said. "You're the one who turned it into a battleground." Her tone was sharp but low. I thought if we actually fixed it up, maybe it wouldn't feel like a war zone anymore. I let out a laugh, dry, bitter. "So your solution was to double down, make more changes, without even telling me?" "I'm tired of asking," she said. "You say no to everything. My parents have done more for this house in a single year than you have in the last 10. That one hit hard. That night, I packed a bag, grabbed Scout, and checked into a hotel. The next day, I swung by the house during lunch to grab some work clothes. I figured it'd be quiet. Laura was at the office. Her parents usually ran errands in the mornings. But when I walked in, the house smelled like scorched toast and bitter coffee. Something was off. I stopped cold. Frank was sitting at the kitchen table typing something on my laptop. He didn't even look up. "What the hell are you doing on my computer?" "Still typing," he said. "Just checking the backyard plat. I found it in your files. Needed to confirm some measurements." I stormed over and slammed the laptop shut. "Get off my stuff." He looked up at me, calm as ever. "Don't be dramatic. You left it open. You're in my house, on my computer. You've crossed every damn line." Frank stood up slowly. "Let me make this clear. If you keep pushing like this, Laura's going to leave you. And when she does, she'll have her whole family behind her in court." I stepped in closer. "Was that a threat?" He smiled faintly. "No, just a reality check." I didn't say another word. I walked out, got in the car, and drove straight to Danny's office. I laid it all out. Everything. The unauthorized garden, the money, the sign, the computer, the construction plans. He nodded once. Time to set up legal protections. That week, we got to work. I changed all the locks, moved my bank accounts, transferred the property title into a trust, my trust, solely in my name. I stopped reacting. I started planning. Then Laura hit me back, with court papers. Not a divorce. No, she went for something else. A petition for co-ownership of the house, claiming she and her parents had contributed financially, namely the $70,000 from the mortgage. They were coming for the house. They wanted it all. But what they didn't realize was I wasn't bluffing anymore. They weren't the only ones building something. I had been building my own case. A trap. Once I got that petition, I didn't get mad. I got methodical. Danny laid out the two paths this could go. 1. They argue that Laura and her parents had contributed enough to claim partial equity. 2. They push for a buyout or force the sale of the property. Either way, I was staring down the barrel of losing everything I'd built. So I made my move. Figuratively speaking, Danny and I salted the earth. Step 1. We filed a motion to contest co-ownership. The house had been purchased and maintained exclusively by me, before the marriage. Danny pulled together tax returns, old mortgage payments, utility bills, even texts from Laura admitting she wasn't on the title. Step 2. We sent Frank and Judith a cease and desist letter, labeling them as trespassers. Our Ring camera had captured Frank entering the shed, building the pergola without permits, even referring to the backyard as his while talking to a contractor. We documented all of it, every instance of overreach, every unauthorized action. Step 3. We prepared a countersuit, a claim for damages and emotional stress due to their illegal construction, occupation, and the financial hole Laura had dug by spending that $70,000 behind my back. Then came my ace in the hole. I called Laura's sister, Rebecca. She lived in Fort Collins. We hadn't spoken in years, but I remembered something. She couldn't stand Frank or Laura. We met at a cafe. I told her everything, showed her texts, photos, blueprints, screenshots, even a clip of Frank using my laptop like it was his. She was stunned and angry. I didn't ask her to take sides, but she did. Turns out, Frank and Judith had pulled the same stunt on her a couple years earlier, after they sold their house. They moved in temporarily, took over her basement, refused to leave when asked, guilt-tripped her with "we're family." She ended up hiring a lawyer to quietly evict them. She handed me the documentation, wrote a sworn statement, and told me she'd testify in court. No hesitation. That changed everything. Now I had a pattern, not just a messy family fight, a documented history of behavior. I passed it all to Danny. 6 weeks later, we had our court date. Laura came in composed, confident. Frank wore a suit like he thought he was the one suing me. Judith kept quiet. When the judge asked Laura's lawyer to explain the basis for her claim, he stumbled through the opening. Then Danny stood and unleashed everything. Every receipt, every video, every photo, every piece of communication. He showed the judge texts where Laura admitted she wasn't on the mortgage. He presented financial records showing I made every single house payment. He showed there was no cosign, no gift agreement, no loan documentation, nothing to support her claim. He showed video of Frank harassing me in my own kitchen. He even played a clip of Laura saying to a friend, "We've basically taken over the backyard. Adam just doesn't realize it yet." The judge did not like that, not one bit. After hours of back and forth in court, the judge finally made it clear. Laura had no legal claim to the house. That $70,000. Legally classified as an undocumented, voluntary contribution. Without any paperwork, it was considered a gift, and gifts don't come with ownership rights. Her petition, denied. The judge gave her 30 days to vacate the property. As for Frank and Judith, they were out immediately. The court issued a formal no trespassing order against both of them. If they ever stepped foot on my land again, I could have them arrested. That night, I came home, walked out into the backyard, and just stood there, took it all in. The shed, the half-finished pergola, the signs, every piece of it. It all had to go. The next morning, I hired a demo crew. We tore it down, every last inch, the raised beds, ripped out, the shed, smashed to pieces with a sledgehammer, the garden gnomes, straight into the trash, and that stupid private property sign, I tossed it into the fire pit and burned it, wrote Frank's name across the front in black marker, just to watch it curl and blacken. Here's the twist: every board, every bit of fencing, every usable scrap, I sold it online, made $2,300, donated the whole thing to a local animal shelter, in Frank's name, tax receipt, and everything. A few days later, Laura came by to pick up the rest of her stuff. She looked around, saw the bare yard, the empty space where their garden used to be, and asked, "Why did you go this far?" I looked her right in the eyes. "Because I let you all take too much, for way too long, and I needed you to remember whose house this is." She didn't cry, she didn't yell, she just stared at the cleared out yard, then said quietly, "You'll be alone forever." I didn't flinch. Better alone than overrun. It's been 5 months now. Scout and I still live here. I built a simple little deck where the shed used to be, just big enough for a grill, a chair, and a spot for Scout to stretch out and soak up the sun. Every evening, I sit out there with a cold beer in hand and listen to the quiet. No wind chimes clinking, no warning signs posted, no unwanted footsteps crunching across the grass, just calm, real, honest peace, and I'll never let anyone take that from me again.